Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Elden Ring. Mouse and keyboard, while it will be better once From Software manages to patch the game or release a proper patch and fix some of the issues, the major issues that this game does have with mouse and keyboard controls, specifically mouse controls. The keyboard is mostly fine, though there are certain issues with respect to that should be improved upon as far as I see it. But once they do that, hopefully they do that in short order, but once they do that, this game is likely going to be a lot better to play with mouse and keyboard than a controller. There are several reasons behind this. The first one, camera control. Right now that's neutered due to the fact that the mouse sensitivity is way too high. Like, right now I've set it to... Right now, if I look at my mouse sensitivity, it's set to 4. And while it feels fine right now after 1.0, 2.1 in terms of the world, where it doesn't feel fine is on a horse. It just feels like horse combat in terms of camera control. It feels just too fast. And I didn't realize this when I was making my video playing about the 1.0, 2.1 patch, that although they've improved, it feels they've improved the camera for on foot combat, they haven't improved it for mounted combat, and that's a pretty big issue. And so that's something they need to fix. There's been some improvements, but yeah, we need more than a band-aid. We need a proper solution. We also need a proper solution for the major performance issues that this game does have. And so when you're playing on mouse and keyboard, you can play the game on mouse and keyboard. I've played it so far on mouse and keyboard, purely on mouse and keyboard. The only thing that I found really terrible with it is the mounted combat. That's genuinely frustrating and annoying. I've died quite a few times, but outside of that, it has been something I've managed quite well. No major issues. Why is mouse and keyboard superior to a controller, you might ask? Well, there are several reasons why, but main reason is camera control. Like, you have a precision with the camera control and with the aiming in general that you just do not have on a controller. No controller is going to compare to that. And so PvPers in Dark Souls 3 in particular, but even before that, hardcore PvPers started using mouse and keyboard because that kind of camera control is crucial. Now, people say, oh, movement control is more limited, but movement control on any PC game is not dictated purely by WASD. Movement control is also dictated by the way the camera is facing. So you can get pretty damn precise movement because you're not moving just purely holding down WASD. You're moving also with the mouse. That's a crucial point. Like, for instance, here I'm just holding down W in space, so I sprint, and I'm choosing the direction that I'm going with the mouse. I'm not like I'm moving forward with W here, and then I turn around, moving whatever. This is incredibly precise and quite significant as well in its own right. Another benefit to mouse and keyboard, the significant one, is the ability to switch things. To use certain items, to have a bunch of keybinds for the various actions instead of using as many key combinations or as many button combinations as you would on a controller. And that can be incredibly useful, having a dedicated keybind for a particular action. Now, given the situation with Elden Ring, there are certain things that are going to require key combinations, but that's still a favor in mouse and keyboard's way, because it's pretty easy to do a key combination. So for instance, if I mount up, I'd have to press R and Z at the same time, and it might be jarring initially getting used to it instead of having a dedicated keybind, and you can't set that to a dedicated keybind. It might be jarring having to do that, but it is obviously a significant benefit. It isn't great in terms of mouse and keyboard. Here's the issue with that. Like, I would love to bind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all that stuff, right? Or have these bind, but I don't have that ability to do so. I'm just going to enable the HUD right here for a couple of reasons. Now, when you start the game, there are a couple of things you want to do. It will start with controller prompts, which is silly. And someone actually mentioned it to me that they're a developer, and the ability for a game to detect whether or not you have a controller on, which apparently this game can't detect if you have a mouse and keyboard on or a controller. That's ridiculous. And virtually every game I've played so far that has controller support on PC has the ability. Apparently doing that just simply requires a line of code. I'm not sure if it's that simple, but it's obviously something simple enough that virtually every other game that has on-screen prompts for both controller and mouse and keyboard has that being detected by the game whenever you're using a device. So if you plug in a controller, you're using it, the game will detect that. If you press a button on a key or you're moving the mouse, the game will detect that. That's virtually every single other game except from this company that I've personally played. In this game, you have to come in here in this menu, and you have to you have to switch this from gamepad to keyboard and mouse. A couple of other things that you might want to change is these settings here, because these will affect you. So disable auto target, disable manual attack aiming. It should start disabled. I'm not sure. These do affect you on mouse and keyboard, I believe, as well. So disable these. You really don't want the game to decide these things for you on mouse and keyboard. Auto lock on can be beneficial to have. It just saves you the hassle of having to press a button whenever you engage in combat, because you will want the auto lock on. It can be very useful in most situations. And you'll find yourself in many more situations where you want to lock on than you will where you want to disable. So that's the second thing you want to do, or maybe even the first thing really you want to do. Now, beyond that, what else is there to say here? Well, let's talk about key bindings and how to set them up properly so it works quite well for you. Now, obviously, this is my personal view on this. I'm going to set the keybinds to default. We're setting all default settings here for keybinds. Now, the default settings are not going to be great. The movement controls, those are the only thing that are just fine. So you have WSND, space for backstep, dodging, rolling, jumping, press to F. You can change jumping if you want to something else, maybe a side mouse button, maybe something else, maybe C or V. Whatever, you can do that. I find using it on F something that I'm getting used to. It's very close to D, so I can just quickly move my finger from D to jump. In many situations, it's not a problem whatsoever. Most of the movement I'm doing anyway, personally, I just hold down W and I move, holding down W and using the mouse to decide which direction I'm using. Obviously, you still want to use W, S, and D, but you want to use the full range there, but most of the time it's fine for me to jump, and no major issues with that. But camera controls, don't touch these. These are also fine. You also really don't want to bother with this. Like, camera controls controlled from a mouse. I find it so ridiculous that they've even put this in here, this entire thing. Like, do they think some people are just going to play this game with a keyboard? Oh boy, I can't imagine that. Like, that would genuinely be horrible. Then we have switch armaments and attack. This is where you want to make some changes. Yeah, sure, you could use your arrows on your keyboard. I don't think I've used these arrows for pretty much anything in an enormously long time. I mean, do these buttons serve a purpose in the modern age? Or are they just a legacy system? Why do we even have arrows on a keyboard? Either way, you can use these if you so desire, but for the most part, I think changing these binds is probably the smarter solution. So what do I do personally? I switch sorcery and incantation to 1, switch item to 2. Just press 1 or 2 when you want to switch these items. You won't necessarily do it a lot. What about right hand and left hand? Well, right hand to Z, pretty easy bind to hit with your thumb. Move your thumb from your space bar, your space you're using to dodge. Pretty easy to do that even in combat. And left hand to C, pretty easy as well. Or you could switch these around. Personally, I've gotten used to this. I just set them to Z and C on that. Maybe setting the reverse would be a smarter idea. Okay. What about attacking? On the right side, you have mouse binds. On the left side, you have keyboard binds. By the way, you can also, if you hold down Shift and you're moving, like if I'll show you what I mean. You can also use holding down Shift. You can also do that. By the way. So this is, by the way, a pretty big benefit. Like, you have two ways of switching it with either the keyboard, just pure keyboard pressing a button, or with using the mouse, all that. I wouldn't necessarily change that. You cannot unbind these, by the way, for whatever reason. I don't see a way to unbind these. But here's where the issues come in. So attack is left mouse button. Just fine, no problems whatsoever, no issues with that. But strong attack is shift left mouse button. This is a major issue in quite a few ways. And your guard, which is your block, is going to be a right mouse button. Look, I understand perhaps the logic that you want about that, but why not have, like, I understand the logic, and it doesn't necessarily work bad, but I find having to hold down shift to do a key combo, to do a heavy attack, to be just awkward and janky. So I've always wanted to change this. This has been a thing in Dark Souls and these kind of games for a while, so I use the right mouse button for that. Okay, what about the guard? What do I switch that to? Because I no longer have mouse button. Well, here, I'm just going to use control. I'm just going to use control on that because I can't remove the keys in this menu. So I'm just using the control modifier. I don't use control for anything, so I'm just going to use control for that. Just to fill this up, right, for the mouse controls. And these have to be mouse controls or modifiers. Anyway, for guard, which is your blocking with your shield, I use shift. Now, shift is a key you want to press with your pinky. Now, this can cause certain issues. Maybe you even want to use caps lock if the game allows it to. Personally, I find shift to be fine in most situations, but actually caps lock would be a good bind if the game actually recognized caps lock as a bind. Note, God of War recognizes caps lock as a bind for this because it is a key bind that you can press. Elden Ring and Dark Souls live in some alternate universe where apparently our keyboards do not have a caps lock button on them. The God of War is the vastly superior PC version of compared to any of the Souls game. You can throw in Sekiro, you can throw all the Dark Souls game, doesn't matter, you can throw in this game as well. Dark Souls is significantly inferior to God of War, despite the memory leak that God of War. Don't think that God of War gets out easy. Now, what about skill? Well, skill is going to be your weapon, right? So skill, in my case, is the barricade shield. It depends on how often you're going to use the skill, I would say. You could use a side mouse button. So, for instance, here I'm going to put it on mouse button here. Actually, I'm going to put both of these just so I don't have any issues. Personally, I've been using free, but I can also use my... most mice these days will have a side mouse button. So I either put it as free or my mouse button, which is pretty easy to use, no problem whatsoever. I do have a mouse with only two side mouse buttons. That's, I think, what the vast majority of people will have. Now, finally, we have use items and event actions. By default, event action is set to E, use item is set to R. I would flip these around. Why is that? Because it's much easier to hit E in the middle of combat to chug a potion than it is to hit R. So it's really weird that they put R. But yeah, just switch those around. And you'll use you'll use R for interacting and all that. You won't do that in every combat situation, whereas you use E, and you can use your fingers very easily, no strain whatsoever. And that's the thing about mouse and keyboard controls and keybinds. You want to set your key binding such a way that you're using your entirety of your left hand and as much of your right hand as you can, or vice versa, depending on which hand is your dominant hand. But with respect to it, you want to set up your binds in such a way that you can use all your fingers. So I'm using my pinky for shift in particular to block, and that's going to put a lot of strain on it, to be clear on it, like especially in certain situations where you're blocking a lot. I'm using my thumb for dodging, backstep, all that kind of stuff, for running. And then I'm using the rest of my fingers mainly for movement control, but also to switch for certain items right here, right? So that's one of the things that I do over here. And it works pretty well. But we're not finished, because there are certain things that you need to do in order to get things going in this game that this menu doesn't tell you. Things that are important. You have gestures. I'm not going to go over that. I'm not interested in the gesture control. Some people might want to do so. Honestly, I don't even know how to use the gestures, I admit. What the keybind for that is, I didn't pay attention with that. But you have the pouch. So how does the pouch work? How does this menu work? You have 6 options here, but really you only have 4. So how does the pouch work? Well, if you hold down your key or interaction key, by default E is set to R by me. If you hold that, you get to access the pouch, and then it works in the same way. Then while holding down R, and this is maybe something the game should have down here as options, then you can use these keys to switch armaments to use a particular item in that pouch. So for instance, my mount is set in the same location. Like if I this is me pressing Z, right? So my mount, I've set that there. I have to hold down RZ. It is weird and there's no way of changing it. I'm getting used to it, though I'm gonna admit in some ways it is really fucking janky as well to do it. You could possibly set up better binds for it, but I also do find that using just Z to be able to switch it is just fine. I guess I could switch control for my interaction or Alt for that, and that would work, but keep in mind Alt is by default set to something. To get off your horse, it's X. So X is your crouch button. And I do find myself annoyed when a game has key combinations and it does tell you in like a prompt and then it disappears. But then you have to figure out for yourself how these keybinds that you changed is going to affect that. To be clear, the game is going to reflect what your changed keybinds are going to do when those prompts appear. So if you've set up your binds in such a way, the game will tell you. And that's how you set up Elden Ring to work on a mouse and keyboard. I'm not the best player in these kind of games, to be very clear on this. I don't spend an enormous amount of time playing these games. I just play them once, twice, 3 times maybe, and then I'm done with each of them. And I haven't even finished Sekiro. It just wasn't my kind of thing. But yeah, for the most part, outside with the camera control, it handles well. Though this is still the worst PC version they've released since the original release of Dark Souls 1 on PC. Not the not the remastered version, but the original release. It's genuinely the worst version of the game since that point. Dark Souls 2 was better, though it had certain issues in terms of input lag, input issues, which were, I don't think they were ever fixed, really, were they? Or maybe they were fixed at a certain point. I think they may have been fixed with Scholar of the First Sin. Dark Souls 3 was just damn fine in terms of mouse and keyboard controls, outside of the obvious prompt issues, but outside of the fact that, again, they didn't put proper mouse and keyboard prompts, it actually ran pretty well. This is worse than Dark Souls 3 because of the problems with the camera control. This is genuinely worse than Dark Souls 3, but hopefully they will work on it, hopefully they'll improve it, and that's how you set up your binds, the kind of things you should take into consideration when setting up your binds for Elden Ring. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.